5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast in partnership with Kidney Care UK, sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.
Hi, and welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. My name is Dee Moore, and I am a kidney warrior. This podcast is dedicated to encourage, educate, and inspire as we explore all aspects of kidney disease, related chronic illnesses, and health. If you have any questions or ideas for topics you would like me to cover, please get in contact with me on social media using the handle Diary of a Kidney Warrior. In today's episode, I am bringing you a kidney warrior story. Now, there's always something you can learn from someone's story, something that can bring inspiration and hope. My guest today from Wakefield, England, is primary school PPA cover teacher Anneka Murphy. Anneka is a wife and mother of 4 children and has been on dialysis for 1 year. Anneka joins me to share her story, the lessons she has learned along her journey, and about her Safe Lines, Safe Lives campaign. Hi, and welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. How are you doing today, Anneka?
I'm really good, thank you, Dee. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm excited about our interview today. And as everyone knows, I love recording Kidney Warrior stories because, as I say every time, and I do sincerely mean it, it is so powerful to learn from someone's lived experience of CKD. So I'm really excited. And there's also a second element to this interview today, where we're going to be talking about your campaign, the Safe Lines, Safe Lives campaign. So yeah, I'm really doubly excited to find out about your story and also your campaign. So we're going to start with hearing your Kidney Warrior story, which lays the foundation of why the campaign was started and how it began. And so without further ado, I'm going to start with my first question. And my first question is, how did your Kidney Warrior journey begin and how were you diagnosed?
This goes back 4 years ago. I've got 4 children, so I was living my life. I was working full time as a PPA cover teacher in a local primary school and living my life to the full. I haven't got any other health conditions, luckily. Don't have diabetes, don't have anything else wrong with me. And I was administering the insulin injection for a child at my school and sadly had a needle stick injury at the time, which is completely unrelated. But because I'd had that needle stick injury, I was asked to go and be checked as a routine check because I'd had a needle stick injury. And went and had a full blood test and said I'd get the results in a week and came away, thought nothing of it. This child was 5. I thought there's not going to be an issue. Sort of forgot about it. And I was actually rushing out the door on a Friday to go and pick up my son. I can remember it vividly. I was in my hallway. I'd got my keys in my hand. I was ready to leave the house and my phone rang and it came up doctors and I thought, oh, I must get this because this is probably the results. And it was my GP and they said that my blood test had come back fine. However, they picked up that I've got CKD stage 3B and they were going to refer me to St. James's. So, what? Let's rewind a little bit. What does that mean? And they didn't really go into it then. They just said, well, CKD stands for chronic kidney disease. Did you not know that you'd got that? No. And I tried to ask some questions, but they weren't really forthcoming with answers. They said, well, don't worry too much about it. You've been referred to St. James's, so you'll get an appointment through the post. And that was my diagnosis. And again, sort of forgot about it a little bit because it didn't mean much to me. Got an appointment through for St. James's, my local renal unit, and asked to go along. And that was sort of where the journey started. And I went to that appointment by myself because, again, I just didn't think it was anything major to worry about.
So literally you get this phone call and out of nowhere you get this diagnosis with no explanation of what it meant. You had no reason, no other chronic illnesses, no reason to believe that your kidneys were in trouble at all, and you're presented with this diagnosis and no further information, which is really bad. It's like time and time again, I hear stories of people who get a diagnosis and that's it. They're not given any further information. So you go along to this hospital appointment, and how did that go? Did they explain more? Did you understand at this point what kidney disease meant? What happened next?
Yeah, amazing. As soon as I was with the right people, my experience of Leeds and the renal unit there have just been incredible. Absolutely incredible. I can't fault them one bit. Really thorough. The consultant that I got initially, really, really thorough. Put me in touch with Kidney Care UK, told me about Kidney Care UK as a charity and, to get in touch with them for sort of patient support. Just really, really thorough. I got this sense that they cared and they wanted to try and find the reason, because that was another thing. They often try to find the reason of why you've got kidney disease. And so I went for like biopsies and things, had a kidney biopsy. But unfortunately with me, they don't know the reason. So my diagnosis is interstitial nephritis, etiology unknown. They can't find the reason for my kidney disease, which is quite rare, actually. Apparently it's 10% of patients. They don't know the reason. But that makes it difficult then, because they can't treat something that they don't know what it is. So my kidney disease just got worse because they couldn't stop it. I was actually on very, very little tablets at the start because, again, often people are put on medication to try and slow down that progression. They couldn't do that with me. So it was mainly about when I got to the first appointment and they do your blood pressure. Of course, I wasn't doing my blood pressure particularly at home by that point, because that's one thing that I personally believe people should do, because often that's the first or the only sign for kidney disease. I didn't have any symptoms at all. But when I went to that appointment, my blood pressure was like 170. So straight away, my blood pressure was out, but I'd never had a problem with my blood pressure. So they said that was kidney related because my kidneys weren't working as well. They were struggling to your kidneys regulate your blood pressure. So the main medication, the first one, was about, and the only thing they could do really was controlling my blood pressure. So for really 2-3 years, that was what we did. We just maintained control of my blood pressure, and they just kept checking up on me, checking in with me as I progressed into the stages. As I got to stage 4, I started attending a low clearance clinic. But yet just back and forth to the hospital, lots of appointments, but that's mainly because they were trying to find a reason and obviously keeping a check on how it's deteriorating and what sort of stage you're at. And that went on for a very long time, really. It was only after, I would say, probably a year or 2 years that dialysis started getting discussed, that it was going to be potentially that I would end up on dialysis. I didn't think for 1 minute that would happen. Never. I think doctors tell you what you need to know. And I started saying to doctors, I want to know everything and I want to know, but I think you actually got to say that to them, because I think medics are almost trained to just tell you the bare minimum, maybe to not shock people. But I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know, right, what's going to happen? Where am I going to... And unless you ask those direct questions, you don't get direct answers. So I started asking those direct questions and started saying, am I going to end up on dialysis? When am I going to go on dialysis? Because they can sort of give you those answers because they've got algorithms that try and work it out. And it was only when I started asking those direct questions, I was getting direct answers. Yes, you will end up on dialysis. And yes, that's going to be within a year. So then you have to process that information.
So how was that process for you? So from when you got diagnosed with CKD to then starting the conversation that you may start dialysis, how was the process of coming to terms with your diagnosis? How was that process for you?
Very emotional. And actually, I describe it. I can remember saying to my husband and my mum, I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience. You're hearing all these conversations and you're going into these appointments, and I was sat there and sort of listening to all these people, and you're meeting lots of different departments, and you're under consultants, you're under dietitians. Suddenly everybody's involved. You've got all these appointments, and renal psychology wanted to see me, and all these different transplant, because, oh, we need to get you on the transplant register. We need to start preparing you for all these different things. And I was sort of sat there, and it feels like an out-of-body experience. Very emotional. The unknown, not knowing. At points I felt like, my life's over. How am I going to manage this? How am I going to do that? I have 4 children, one of which has got severe autism. This isn't going to be feasible. I'm not going to be able to do this and work. I'm sure everybody feels that because it's the unknown. You don't know what's coming. People are frightened of the unknown. I knew my equilibrium, my family and my life as I knew it was going to change. It was going to be different. So, yeah, really, really frightening, overwhelming, at times like a lack of control, but also not just emotional. The lack of control really bugged me and bothered me because I like to be really meticulous and organised and know what's happening. And it was sort of all if, buts and maybes. And that's really hard to live with. So when I was saying, well, when am I going to go on dialysis? Well, it's approximately this, or it could be this, or you can't plan and you can't live like that. So I found that really difficult. And it's very much, yes, they say sort of around, or my renal unit said around sort of a GFR of 9%, you'll be referred to, low clearance and discussing different dialysis options. But actually, because of how different people react to CKD and to renal failure particularly, it's not so much the number, it's how your body's coping, and everybody's different at that. And so actually, I ended up on dialysis not at 9, I was on 11 because my bloods were out and I was being sick and not coping very well with it, my body. I don't mean me mentally. So they referred me to low clearance at 11%. And this is the thing, you're sort of waiting to hit a number and thinking it's going to happen then. And for some people it does. And for some people it might be lower because their body's doing really well. And for some people like me, it was actually a little bit sooner that they were saying, no, they wanted to get me on dialysis. So it's really difficult because there's no set time. There's not an instruction manual. It's difficult for them to actually give you those answers. But for some people, and certainly for me, I wanted those answers. But yeah, certainly an emotional, very emotional journey. And for the family as well. It's, at the end of the day, it's not just me that was going through this. My husband's had to adjust to that. My husband's had to process all that. And a bit like a pregnancy, when it's happening to you, it's different. It's harder for them, I think, in some ways, because they're not necessarily sitting in all those appointments. They're not necessarily getting all those answers. They're not feeling how you are feeling. They're watching from an outsider's point of view. And in some ways that's harder because, or I think it was harder for Richard and the children because they're wanting to fix it for me and they can't. And that's the hard thing to accept, that all this is happening and there's absolutely nothing we can do. We've just got to wait. And it's a waiting to get poorlier. And that's really hard. So yeah, not just for the person, for the family as well.
So for somebody like yourself who has a family, maybe has very young children, they've been diagnosed with CKD, what advice do you have for them in terms of explaining to their children about CKD and also about navigating the disease?
Yeah, for me, you've got to judge your own family. I can't tell people how to deal with their families or their children, and they might think things aren't appropriate and different parenting techniques and skills. But for me and what worked with my family or is working, and it's not perfect, and we have days where people cry and are upset, and I'm not saying you're not going to have tears, but to sit down and talk about it and be open and honest. And if they asked a question, I didn't bombard them with information, but if they asked, I certainly answered, because if children are asking, they're ready to know the answer, in my opinion. And if you don't tell them, they're going to go and Google it anyway, and that's not always the best option. Or they might go away and tell friends, and then the friends say, oh, well, I heard that this, that and the other, and it's frightening for them. Knowledge is power. And if they are equipped with the knowledge, then they feel empowered. And that's what's worked with my children. Oliver's got autism. It's slightly different. So he doesn't always ask, but I don't want him to be frightened by things that he sees, certainly now in renal failure when I'm doing dialysis. So I do sit down and play it down and say in language that he understands, very simple, happy language. It's all going to be okay. Keep smiling and let him judge my body language, and do preempt and tell him things that are going to happen so that he knows that's going to happen. But if I think about it, if I hadn't have had all those conversations and then this would have come, I feel my children and my husband and my family were really prepared, and it was still a shock to them because they didn't come to every appointment. They're not consumed by it like you are as the patient. So, it's important that they are sort of desensitized to as much as possible. if it's inevitable that that's going to happen and you're going to go on dialysis, because they can look a bit scary, the machines, and a bit frightening, and certainly for the patients as well. I'm talking like this, but I wasn't like this. I was absolutely terrified the first time I had to do a dialysis session. I was absolutely petrified, physically shaking, and I'm quite a confident person, but it is terrifying. But I encouraged my daughter and my sons to come along, and I asked if they could come and sit, and even some renal nurses were like, will they want to see that? Well, yeah, I want them to see it, because I don't want people to not be exposed to it. And certainly not my family. And they wanted to. And I'd say, do you want to? And I can remember one of my sons said, no, I didn't. And that was fine. But my daughter and another son did. And so they came along to the unit and saw the machine. And my hospital, my trust do pre-dialysis sessions. So you might get invited to those. They were really helpful. And I think every trust should offer those, because it helps you make an informed decision. I've actually gone and talked at some pre-dialysis sessions. So they have somebody there doing every type of and form of dialysis, and you can ask them questions, and they're stood there and telling you about their life. And that was really important, because that's better than speaking to a nurse that's not, and no disrespect to nurses, but a nurse that's not done dialysis. I wanted to know the logistics of how it was going to fit into my life and how I was going to do it. And only really a patient can tell you that and what they're doing. And then you can adopt what they're doing and see if that'll work in your life. So going back to your original question, talk to your family. Make sure that they're informed. Make sure that they know what's going on. Don't bury your head in the sand. Don't allow them to bury their head in the sand. The other big one for me is Kidney Care UK. So I was asked to get in touch with them. Again, I didn't realise what an amazing charity they were. Didn't realise how they were going to impact my life and help my life. But they actually, in those very early days when the children were younger, sent out some child-friendly leaflets that they could look through with pictures and visuals. They were brilliant. They were there. I can remember just ringing them. They assigned me a case officer that I could just ring and I could talk to if I was worried about something. And you were getting factual answers. You can't always get in touch with your renal unit, or you'd have to wait until the next appointment. They helped me think about questions to ask. And I wrote them down so that when I went to the next appointment, I had the right questions. Write things down, because your memory goes to pot. And it really does with kidney failure. But write them down. Have those questions there. Sometimes when you go to an appointment, you feel rushed, that you've only got a certain time slot. I never felt like that with Kidney Care UK. They'd give me the time. They'd let me speak to them. I could ring them back. I could email them. I can remember in the early days, they were the ones that advised on food for me and things before I'd seen the dietitian. So they really are an amazing charity to get in touch with. They also sent me an email with loads of links in after a really long conversation. This was now when I was going on to dialysis, but obviously they were there in support at the beginning, but with who to contact, what benefits I was maybe entitled to, council tax reductions, all the different things. And that was all Kidney Care UK that sent me all that information. So they're definitely, don't go Googling, because that will just terrify the life out of you. And I think if you're going to research or get information, make sure it's from a correct source. And Kidney Care UK were that for me. They were fantastic. So yeah, get in touch with them, see what they can do to help.
So you had this transitional period between getting your diagnosis and then starting dialysis. You were attending all these different appointments, getting loads of different information, still working, still managing your family, all of this. How did you manage to balance all of this whilst coming to terms with having your diagnosis?
Getting a family planner. And that sounds silly, but I had to get, because the amount of appointments got ridiculous. So made sure I wasn't trying to just retain it all, not just having it all in my phone. I had a visual family planner that we stuck up on the kitchen with all my appointments on. So if the kids came home and I wasn't home from work, they weren't panicking. Oh yeah, mum's at that appointment, I can remember. So for us, that was a biggie. But then there is a lot to navigate in it. And I'd be lying if I said, and I feel knowledge is power. So I'm not wanting to, overshare or scare people, but it is going to consume your life. And if anything, it's settled down now. But initially, where they're trying to diagnose and where they're trying to slow down progression, I had so many appointments, because it was literally appointment after appointment after appointment, different departments, transplant, within transplant, there's live transplant, there's deceased transplant. Then there's the dietitians. Then there was renal psychology, low clearance, consultants, so many appointments. Then your GPs are wanting to just chase up and, oh, has this happened? And oh, so it was just constant, and medication, and then trying to manage the medication and picking up prescriptions. And I had to write it down. I had to just visually have it, because yes, I was working full time. Yes, I'm still a mum and managing clubs, trips, everything else that mums have to do, washing, ironing. And I just had to literally start planning in, right, on that day, I've got to do washing. On that day, I've got to do ironing. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Because you can't even offload the appointments. It's you that's got to go to those appointments. So, I would be lying if I said it doesn't consume. And I think if you can go into this journey knowing you are going to have a lot of appointments, you'll deal with it better. It's not going to come as a shock to you. It's not going to come as a shock that you're going to be involved with that many departments. Most people just think, or family members thought I was just going to a renal appointment. But actually, often they were all different departments, because I'll never forget my brother saying to me, well, weren't you there yesterday? You were with renal yesterday. So, oh, yeah, this is a different department now. This is renal dietitians, or this is renal psychology. Or so you do have, and take everything that's offered to you, because I'll never forget, they said to me, before we activate you on the transplant register, my hospital asked people to attend 3 psychology sessions with a renal psychologist to just talk through how you're feeling about things. And I was like, oh, I'll do this if I have to, but I think this is all a bit mamsy-pamsy for me. I don't think I need to go and speak. But actually, after I'd had those 3 sessions, I ended up staying for 10 more, because you don't have to be discharged after 3. I found them so useful. I cried, I laughed, I was able to talk to my renal psychologist, know about renal issues. I was able to offload. I found that I was being very angry. I left like a weight had lifted off my shoulders. It really, really helped. I had to. I don't know about other trusts. Some people might be offered them and turn them down. I would go, see if it's going to be beneficial, because I realised I wasn't wanting to talk to my family about how I was feeling, because whilst ever they saw mum coping and mum happy, everything was okay. The minute I got upset, then they'd get upset, and then I'd feel bad that I'd made them upset or worried. So then I just stopped talking. So I really wasn't talking to my husband a lot at that point about how I was feeling. It was more factual. And actually, that's not good for anybody. And it made me very bitter and angry. And I went into the renal psychology sessions thinking, I'm going to hate this. I'm going to find this really difficult, and I'm doing it because I've got to before I'm activated. And then I ended up staying we just kept booking in another session. I ended up staying for 10 more sessions because they were so beneficial to me. So take whatever you're offered, find out, take the advice, follow the advice on diet that you get given in those early days, because it can help, it can make a difference. Absolutely follow the advice of the professionals, your renal unit, because they know and they're trying to look after you. And write down things, write down on a family planner or a calendar, all the appointments, planning your days, planning some special time with your family, because it does. Certainly when I got to sort of stage 4, it got crazy with scans, biopsies, loads of things happening, and it sort of consumed my life. It's not a nice feeling, is that? Again, because it's a lack of control. So try and take back some control and planning things and planning. We used to plan in, make sure we'd had a family day, or make sure we'd had this, so that I felt like I was still accessing that, as well as working, as well as all these appointments. Yeah. So just try and be organised and try and write it down and plan and write down your questions that you want to ask.
So you started dialysis, and was it hemodialysis you started on?
No. So I actually started on peritoneal dialysis in February this year. And that was the first dialysis that I did. For me, again, and I'm a big advocate of PD, it fit into my life. Peritoneal dialysis you can do during the night. So I thought, brilliant, that's the one for me. Did my research. It's a gentler dialysis, gentler that you can start on that. Thought, brilliant. Started on 7 hours, 5 nights a week, which I think is sort of the starting dose, if you want. And gradually ended up doing 7 nights a week for 10 hours and a day fill. and was very poorly, was still being sick, was on anti-sickness tablets coming out my ears, and it wasn't making a difference. My bloods were all over the place. I look back now, I looked terrible. I looked grey. I felt ill all the time, but I was still working full time, still keeping going. And then coming home and hooking up to dialysis every night. But I was determined. I kept saying to my consultant, was saying, I don't think this is working. I said, well, can we try something else? Try something else. This is the only one that's going to work with my life. Again, I'd consumed myself in the knowledge of peritoneal dialysis, so that was all I knew. So I didn't want to switch. The thought of switching terrified me, just like the thought of initially going on dialysis. And the team that I knew, it was a small team. I got to know them. They've become like family. I can't switch. What am I going to do? I can't not do peritoneal dialysis. But I was being told at every appointment, this isn't working for you. You're a low transporter. We're struggling to get that clearance of the toxins. I'd started building up fluid in my ankles. It wasn't clearing the fluid, despite all this dialysis that I was doing. So the decision early August this year, I had a meeting with my consultant, my PD consultant, and they said, you need to switch over. You're going to risk multi-organ failure because your organs are not getting the clearance of the toxins. We need to go get you onto hemo. And I just burst into tears because hemodialysis for me at that time felt like the end of the world. I just thought, oh my God, it's more aggressive. I hear bad things about it. I'm going to have one of them ugly things in my arm. What are they going to do? How are they going to do that? Because a fistula needs time to mature. Fistula is one of the types of access, the thing I'm referring to as the ugly thing in your arm. And I just thought, I can't do this. How am I going to do it? PD, I can do it at home. I'm going to have to go to a hospital. How's that going to work? So my mind just went poof and blew with all these questions because I didn't know hemo. I didn't have a clue what hemo was. I'd not even considered it because peritoneal dialysis just fit into my life, but it was making me poorly. So literally within 24 hours after I'd agreed, I was being admitted to have a central line fitted. And I was told I needed a central line in my chest because they needed to switch quickly. Because if I was not doing peritoneal dialysis and it wasn't clearing, we needed to get better clearance. We needed access, emergency access. And so I had this central line fitted, which at that point I'd got a peritoneal dialysis catheter in my stomach for the access for PD. They couldn't take that out straight away because they needed to check that I was okay on hemo and my line was going to work. So I can just remember feeling butchered. I just thought more things in my body. I used to look at myself in the mirror and cry because I just thought, who is this person anymore? I don't recognise them. I don't recognise who this person is. All that's involved with caring for these devices in your body. And I must admit, the PD catheter, when I had that fitted, that was under general anaesthetic. That was fine. I was very sore afterwards, and there's a lot to contend with, and you have to get used to having it there. But the line was a whole different thing for me. And again, not wanting to frighten people, but I just think it's realistic because people said to me, oh, you'll be fine having your line done. You'll be absolutely fine if you have that done under local. I found it horrific. I hated it. It was awful having it fitted, but it was necessary and I had to have it done. So again, it's a necessary evil. I had the line fitted, and again, nobody had sort of said to me. But then that afternoon, I had my line fitted in the morning, and then that afternoon, I was like preparing to go home. They're like, right, we'll go and get you hooked up onto dialysis. I was like, whoa! I haven't had time to think about this. What do you mean I need to hook up onto the hemo? And straight away, they got me hooked up, and I did a couple of hours on. They wanted to check that the line's working. And I just sat there on the end of the bed and cried. My mum had come with me for the line fitting. I was absolutely petrified at the thought of all this blood going out my body into a machine, and it's putting your trust in a new team as well. I'd trusted my team, and actually the sister in charge of the PD team came onto the ward to see me, and she sat and held my hand on the bed, and she was like, you're going to be fine. They're an amazing team. We'll still look after you. We'll come and check on you. It was heart-wrenching. You throw... When I talk about his lack of control, you throw yourself into these professionals that you hope know what they're doing and hope are going to look after you properly. And because you don't know any of it, it's terrifying. And it is. And I won't, deny that of anybody. I think you're not human if it's not terrifying. And the reality of, I thought, again, peritoneal dialysis, I'll be absolutely fine. And it is fine for a lot of people. But then when you're told that that's not working, and you've got to have something, and it's got to be that urgent to be going in the next day for a central line fitting, and your whole world's turned upside again, you realise how actually serious this is, and that, you're having doctors saying to you, you can't really go another 2 weeks on this. You've got to, and you know what they're talking about. They're talking about if you are not getting the clearance, you've got a potential to die. You've got to have this. And that is absolutely, it's like a bus hitting you. It is hard. It's heart-wrenching. And that was how my hemodialysis journey started. And that's, I'm on hemodialysis now. I started though with hospital dialysis. The story moves on from there. But that was my hospital dialysis. I began then having hospital hemodialysis 3 times a week.
I can relate to every part of that because I started on PD myself, and unfortunately PD did not work for me, and I had to switch over to hemodialysis in an emergency situation. I remember the thought that I was going to have this line put into my chest, and you use the word butchered, and that is how I felt about having surgery like that. I can really relate to that feeling of losing PD and the autonomy that you have to do PD at home and choose when you connect to the machine. And it's not easy. It's a grieving process, like an instant grieving process that you go through to have to accept that things are going to be instantly different and that you have to go to hospital for therapy. You can't do it at home straight away. And honestly, I can relate to every single part of that, of what you say. So for you then, how was the transition between PD and hemo? How did hemo work for you in terms of the treatment? Did you get a better experience? Was your clearance better?
Wow. Yeah, what a good question. Again, people told me, consultant said, you need to switch on to this. You are going to be better on this. And I was like, yeah, but am I? I was told I was going to be fine on PD, and now it's not working, and I never assumed it wouldn't work. And so you just don't believe. But within a week, so that is 3 sessions, not even full sessions of hemodialysis, because by that point they're just breaking you into it. Within a week, my bloods were 100% better within a week. And certainly within 2 weeks, I felt like a different person. Within 2 weeks, I had more energy. I was sleeping better. I was eating better. I'd stopped being sick. My tablets had halved. So when I was on PD, I was taking 24 tablets a day. On hemodialysis, on hemodialysis now, it's literally half that, because a lot of it goes through the machine. And a lot of the tablets I was taking on PD, with PD you have to take laxatives because your bowel has to be empty because of the tube to be able to dialyse properly. So a lot of that was laxatives, which brings its own problems and own complications. But then I was on so many anti-sickness tablets to stop me being sick. So straight away, less tablets, feeling amazing, sleeping better, more energy. I'd got colour back in my face. People were saying to me, gosh, you're looking so well. Hemodialysis, it suits me. But it just didn't fit into my life. So I couldn't get into a satellite unit. I was obviously used to doing PD at home, comfort of home, being with your family. I couldn't get into a satellite unit because that's a whole different issue. Satellite units are just full to the brim and bursting at the seams because they just haven't got the facilities. So I had to go to J48 at Leeds Hospital, which is their renal ward, which their staff are just incredible. Oh my goodness, they are just so lovely, and they're just amazing nursing team, so funny, and just bring so much love and laughter to the ward. But there are a lot of poorly people dialysising in hospital, and generally speaking, unless you are really poorly, you go to a satellite unit. Well, they couldn't get me in, so I had to go to hospital. And trying to fit that in with work, well, I couldn't. So work were not willing to pay me to go to dialysis, which I got my unions in. Unfortunately, I lost that battle. They weren't willing to pay for me to go to dialysis. They weren't classing it as an appointment. They were classing it as treatment. So they basically said, they shot themselves in the foot, that you're going to have to go on sick leave whilst you're doing dialysis because it's too much time out of work, 3 times a week for 4 hours a session. But unfortunately, one of the problems of going to hospital is you end up being there the whole day. You're waiting for hospital transport, or you're waiting for nurses to hook you up. You don't get on straight away. There might be another alarm or a problem, so they end up not dealing with them because you're stable at that moment, and so you're late coming off. So there were all sorts of and not through any fault of the nurses. It just ended, and I'll never forget one day I went at 8:30 in the morning and I didn't get home till 4:30 the whole day. And it was only 4 hours of dialysis. The whole day was consumed by travelling. It took me an hour to get to Leeds from where I live. It shouldn't take an hour, but it was rush hour. So there was all these factors, or an accident or whatever. So within, I think it was 4 weeks into hospital dialysis, I said to the sister, I need to get home. I need to be at home with my family. This is depressing me. I can't be here in this environment with these. There were worlds apart from me and my health, but patients on dialysis. And it was putting me not in a good place. I didn't like it. I hated the traveling. I hated going. So she said to me, right, well, let's start doing shared care. So I then started doing shared care, which was amazing. And if you want to take back some control, even if you don't want to get home, but you want to take back some control and make sure that you are only there for the least amount of time as possible at your unit or hospital, go and try shared care, because it was just amazing. It was so empowering that I was able to do my own trolley and prepare my own trolley. And then she said to me, well, you can do your line. Well, often in units and hospitals, it's 2 people to a line. So this was like mind blowing to me. I was like, well, how do I learn to do a line just on my own? Like, well, we can show you ways and show you techniques. And as my confidence grew, I was then pushing, I want to get home. I want to get home. And there is a lot to learn. And again, I'm not going to beat about the bush. It is a massive achievement to get home. And you have to have stable blood pressure. You have to have certain things. You can't have major other health problems. You need to be relatively stable to get home. And often I asked how long it will take me to get home, because I only had 6 months full pay sick leave, and then I'd be going on to half pay. So I was wanting to do it in that time and trade. I said, it usually takes about 6 months to get people home. Well, I did it in 8 weeks. So because I was off on sick, I was able to completely throw myself at learning what to do and focus just solely on that. And I came home and I used to practice again in my head, going through what I'd learned that day. And then they'd sign me off and then we'd learn something else. You've got to be doing so much shared care before they'll get the home hemo team involved. And then once the home hemo team got involved, I switched to Seacroft Hospital from J48 Leeds, started doing dialysis sessions with them at Seacroft, because again, they have certain ways and techniques of doing things. The wallboard all got fitted at my home. I've got pictures of all that on my social media, and the machine being delivered and everything that's involved in that. So the NHS come out and do all that. And then I got home. And so they start doing dialysis at home. So now I dialyse at home. For the first, again, it's not a set time, but for about 4 weeks, I had the home hemo team coming out. So I'd have a nurse there all the time. And gradually they wean you off that they'd come while you're connecting, then they'd go sit in the car. And then they'd come in while you disconnect. And then the next time they'd not come for connecting. And they are amazing. I feel more looked after now, which is probably bizarre to say, and cared for with the home hemo team than I did before. But that's not because of the nurses. That's just because they've got less patients to deal with. The nurses on a renal ward, it's a huge turnover of staff. You're seeing different people every day. They're not necessarily going to have seen you coming off dialysis the last session if there was any problems. It's different staff. This is the same staff, the same 8 staff that I'm dealing with all the time. They only have 25 patients. There's not many people that get home. They're constantly on call. They've got a phone that I can WhatsApp and speak to them through. And if there's a problem during the night, you've got Fresenius, but you've also got the ward that you can ring. I came home from a surgery on the Friday, from the surgery I've just had, and they rang me straight away and they were like, are you okay? You're home? I just wanted to ring and check on you and check how you're doing. They're just fabulous. So I feel they just know me absolutely inside out. So I've still got my line. I'm still dialysing at home with a line. So it is possible to do dialysis at home with a central line, which some people don't realise. I do it all myself. I've posted videos on my social media and things of me doing that, just again to raise awareness. I have just had a fistula formation created, but I'm not going to start using that till sort of March time, because I just want to get to grips with what I'm doing at home with my central line. But I'm home. I'm now not travelling. I get to do dialysis on my heated blanket. and my kids around, and I'm hoping to go back to work then middle of January. And I'll be doing dialysis then on a Tuesday, Thursday, early evening, probably like 6 till 10, and then on a Saturday or a Sunday. So, yeah, life's good at the moment. My life certainly hasn't come to an end. It's just different whilst I'm waiting for a kidney transplant.
So hemo definitely has been life-changing for you in a good way, which is really good to hear.
Yeah.
So now we've heard your story and how you came to have your central line. We're now going to focus on your campaign, the Safe Lines, Safe Lives campaign. So for everyone listening, what is this campaign about?
So obviously I've got a central line now. I've had that central line in my chest, which goes directly to your heart. So I will talk in layman's terms because not everybody listening to this podcast will probably understand all the terminology. So I'll try and explain all that. So the central line is in your chest and it goes directly to your heart. That is your dialysis access. Because it goes to your heart, because it's an open wound essentially all the time that's there is a huge risk of infection. And this is why doctors prefer a fistula, because it is a gold standard access. You can swim with a fistula. It's part of you. It's attaching a vein and an artery together. So it's your anatomy. It's sealed. There's less risk of infection, get better dialysis, all those sorts of things. But there is always going to be a place for central lines because people have emergencies. Some people prefer a central line. Some people don't want fistulas. You can't be made to have a fistula. I am quite happy with my central line at the moment. I've got a fistula, but I'm not going to be using it to sort of March, April. And fistulas aren't without problems themselves. People have problems with fistulas too, and they can fail. So there is always going to be a place for a central line. I left the hospital after having my central line, and my hospital gave me a sample pouch, a shower pouch, and said, here you go. This is what you need to use to have a shower. And this is who you need to contact to organise the prescription. And they will organise the prescription for you, this company, and they will contact your GP and do it on a repeat prescription. Brilliant. So left the hospital, got home and used this pouch. It was fantastic. The line stayed dry. Now, the reason the shower pouch is important is because it is national policy, it's national guidelines, and Leeds Teaching Hospital, which is my hospital, follow that national guideline that a central line must remain dry. And that is because of the risk of infection, because you can get sepsis or a central bloodline infection. So it has to stay dry. Says that in guidelines written everywhere. So I've been having these on prescription since August. Not a problem, never an issue. So I've been using them for months. Never had a breach, I will say as well. It's always stayed dry. I think that's an important point to work out. But these pouches have not failed me. They've been fantastic. And one day I got a phone call. I was actually on dialysis at Seacroft because I was still training to come home. And this was 3 weeks ago. So the campaign is still a baby campaign. It's still in its early days. And it was my GP saying, unfortunately, a block had been put on my prescription and these pouches would no longer be available. They had been informed by the ICB, which is an organisation that organises budgets. They had been informed that they were too expensive. And so the decision had been made, still not got to the bottom of who's made this decision. The decision to be made that they were too expensive and you would no longer be getting them. To which I obviously wasn't very happy about because I said, well, how am I going to shower? How am I going to get washed? So I came off the phone like a woman on a mission and decided I was going to contact my MP. So my local MP has got involved. She has written to the health secretary. She is escalating it. I've got in touch with Kidney Care UK. I've got in touch with other organisations that are willing to escalate it. So lots of people have got involved now. I've had telephone conversations and emails and meetings with lots of people high up within these organisations because everybody was blaming each other. Everybody was saying, well, yes, you do need to keep it dry. And I'm saying, well, how am I going to do that if you're not going to provide these pouches because they're too expensive? Well, you're going to have to pay for them or you're going to have to just figure out a way. So they were telling you have to do this, but not giving you the tools to do it. I contacted BBC Look North and they came out and filmed. So they filmed me on dialysis. They were very keen to run the story. So that aired on Friday just gone. Again, that's available on my social media if it's not your region because it's regional news. And it was a really long coverage talking about how these are so necessary that they reduce the risk of infection, just like wearing dressings. So there's dressings on central lines all the time during the day, again, to reduce infection, which is why it's necessary to be wearing these pouches. Your water is not sterile. It comes from the mains. There is bacteria, which normally is not an issue for people, but when they've got a central line, it is an issue. So it is needed to wash, not just to shower. It's needed if you're washing your hair, because of the risk of hair dripping on your central line. It's absolutely imperative that line is covered for you to wash. But at the moment, it's a bit of a postcode lottery, because as more research I've done, Kidney Care UK have been fantastic. They've done some looking into this as well. It is not just West Yorkshire that this is affecting. This is affecting people all over the country, in different pockets of the country. But then there is pockets of the country that are getting them. So it's not everywhere. There are, some areas that are getting them and able to get them, which is barbaric. That's one area can get it, but then another can't. And other forms of patients, which again, I'm not going to say who they are, but if you're not a dialysis patient and you have a central line, those patients are still getting these pouches. And some of them are in Wakefield, which again riles me, because that's almost like saying one condition is more important than the other. There's no equality. So I've definitely stirred a hornet's nest with this, and I'm not going to let up on it. I'm hoping in January, there's a big meeting going on today about this with my MP and other lead organisations that are involved in this. And my MP is raising it directly in Parliament in January. There is going to be health questions. So it's not going to be, it's going to take a while. It's not the end of it. All I can keep doing is shouting about it, sharing it on social media, keeping the momentum going, which is how I met you, Dee, from things that you've seen. But that's all I can do at the moment. It's very hard. You're fighting a system, but that's all I can do. I know that it's not right. I know that something needs to change. It is not fair to say that patients that need something can't have it because of cost. It would cost far more to treat a central bloodline infection or sepsis. We're talking about it costing in excess of £10,000 to treat a bloodline infection for everybody that would be involved in that, the medication, the procedures that would be needed. You're talking about £150 a month for a prescription. So, damage limitation, it's a no-brainer. Cost cut elsewhere, not in areas where a patient's safety is put at risk. So that's the campaign that I'm fighting at the moment.
It definitely befuddles my brain that in 2024, you actually have to start a campaign for something like this. I mean, for myself, I don't know if everyone knows, but I have a central line, and I know infection control is your number one concern. And like you said, this is going into your heart. This is no joke. This is really, really serious. And having recently had sepsis myself, I know the implications of when infection happens, it is dangerous and you become ill very quickly and it can be life-threatening. So I cannot understand a simple thing as a pouch, why there would be resistance to something that can literally save people's lives. So for me and the listeners, what can we do to support this campaign?
What I've sort of been saying to everybody is it doesn't matter where you are in the country, and it doesn't even matter if you are on dialysis. I have had people contact me through social media and through all the channels that I'm sort of going mad on about this, and they're not on dialysis, and they've said, how can I help? Write to your MP. It is so easy to contact your MP. You go on to .gov.uk, find my MP. And on there, you find your local MP and you can send them a direct email and they have to reply. Even if they're not willing to do anything, they have to reply. And so you have to address it with them and use me as an example. Say that, when you contact your MP, it doesn't have to be about you directly. It can be about something you feel passionate about that needs to change. So whether you're on dialysis, whether you've got a central line or whether you're not on dialysis, it's going to help my campaign. And my MP has said the more MPs that are made aware of this, the better. We have strength in numbers. So if anybody wants to do anything, if you want to support, contact your MP, just send an email, say you're not happy about this. if you're a taxpayer, you have got a say in your NHS. And so talk about with your MP that you're not happy about. Use me as an example. Say my name. Say I'm from Wakefield. This has happened. She's got her MP involved. It's all going to support my MP and give her strength in numbers. The more MPs that raise it, because if other MPs, I am aware that there is one other MP that has been contacted and has also written to the Health Secretary. The more MPs that write to Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, the better, because that's how you get awareness and that's how you get coverage. After the questions in January, once my MP has done direct questions in Parliament, we're going to be looking to set up a petition as well if we're still no closer. So that's sort of a plan that we've got in January. And obviously I will share that petition on my social media channels and with you, Dee. And then if people want to sign the petition, again, it's strength in numbers. But initially, anybody that's wanting to help share my posts, share things that I'm putting on. I am putting things on and updates about the campaign, but I'm also sharing things about awareness. I am not bothered about sharing videos of me connecting. People do not realise what is involved and how life-changing kidney failure is. And that's what I'm trying to get out there. There needs to be a change. It needs to be recognised, and kidney failure and kidney disease needs a bigger voice. And so share any posts, contact your MP, make your MP aware of my campaign and see if they can support my MP in any way. It's as simple as that. People think it's difficult to contact your MP. It's not. It's really easy. It's a simple email, or you can do it in writing, whichever you want. But I've had people all over the country contacting their MPs, and not everybody is directly affected by a central line or kidney related. It's just something that they feel passionate about. And then, like I say, sharing my posts.
So listeners, irrespective of whether you have a central line or not, or whether you're on dialysis or not, you can contribute to this campaign by writing to your local MP. We'll put the links to the website, the government website, for you to find your local MP in the description box. And also so that the listeners know how to reshare your posts. What are your social media handles?
So I'm on various groups, but obviously they'd have to come into those groups. But I am on Facebook, which it's Anneka Nova Murphy. So it's Anneka Nova, Nova, Murphy, Murphy. They can request to add me as a friend. So I've created a TikTok account, which is at Anneka Murph. So it's Anneka Murph, Kidney Warrior. So at Anneka Murph, Kidney Warrior. And that's my TikTok page where I'm sort of updating about the campaign and awareness videos that I'm doing. So yeah, I'm happy for anything. It's a public account. It can be shared, share away. And let's get everybody talking about kidney failure. So that's the voice it needs.
Absolutely. So that's at Anneka Nova Murphy on Facebook and at Anneka Murph, Kidney Warrior on TikTok. And I will put those links and the updated links, because you said you'll be discussing in January. So we'll put the updates as well as they come in the description box. So please do support the campaign. Use your voice. There's power and safety in numbers. So please do get behind Anneka's campaign. Safe lines, safe lives. Let's get behind it. So you've shared with us your Kidney Warrior story and how you came to the point of needing a central line to then starting your Safe Lines, Safe Lives campaign. So my final question is, what is your final word of encouragement for the listeners?
Life's not over. It's just a different life. Yeah, it's not great. You have to deal with it. You have to get on with it. It's not what anybody wants. But please don't think for 1 minute that life is over. I still have happiness. I still laugh. I still have lovely moments in my life. You've just got to find a new way and navigate a new way. And you'll do that. And you will get there. It just takes time, and you will get there. It will seem like your world is falling apart, but you will get there. And just keep going. And even because I meet people that are not on the transplant register, transplant isn't everything. And that's another thing to point out. Not everybody can get on the transplant register. And some people know that they're going to live the rest of their life on dialysis. And that is possible too. It is absolutely possible to do. And you're able to be well and feel well, just finding the right routine, finding the right dialysis, the right tweaks. There's so much that they can do to make you feel better. And just don't give up. It's not the end of the world at all. And get in contact with Kidney Care UK because they've been amazing and they will support you. And it's just about having the right support around you, the right safety blankets around you. But yeah, don't give up. You'll be fine and you'll get through it.
Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for the advice and encouragement that you gave. And also, I really want to get behind your Safe Lines, Safe Lives campaign. So let's get behind Anneka and really get the word out there. We want to keep everyone safe. We want to make sure that no one ends up with an infection because they don't have the right equipment. So let's get behind Anneka. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. And don't forget that you can contact me on social media using the handle Diary of a Kidney Warrior. Please do subscribe to the podcast and please do tell a friend. New episodes of this podcast are released every other Monday. Until next time, take care and choose to live.
Diary of a Kidney Warrior, sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.